Please welcome the candidates, Republican Doug Ducey and Democrat Fred DuVal. Note to our audience, that will be the first round of applause of the night. You'll hear another round of applause at the end of the evening, and then in between, they will observe silence. Each candidate has 1 minute to make an opening statement. We flipped a coin to see who would go first, and it is Doug Ducey.
Let me say before I begin, I'm 100% supportive of our president in his role as Commander-in-Chief on the eve of 9/11 to protect our nation. And now for my opening statement, I'd like to say my name's Doug Ducey, and I do want to be your next governor. I'm proud to announce that tonight we have been endorsed by the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and the National Federation of Independent Businesses. These are job creators large and small from across Arizona, and I'm honored to receive their endorsement. I'm also happy that my wife Angela is joining me tonight. We'll be married 24 years this October. We have 3 sons, Jack, Joe, and Sam, who are home doing homework and not watching this on television. I have a very clear agenda as your governor. I'm a businessman, and I want to take a plan of action to the 9th floor to be an independent voice to jumpstart our economy so that every Arizonan that wants a job can find a job and build a fulfilling career. I want to improve our K-12 education system so our children, teachers, and parents can have improvement inside our schools, and I want to get Arizona out from underneath the thumb of the federal government. I'm looking forward to the conversation and discussion tonight. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you, Doug Ducey, and thank you, audience. Fred DuVal.
Thank you very much. Great to be with all of you, and certainly our prayers and thoughts go out to those who will be called upon to serve our country in uniform at this time when the nation needs to come together to face this terrible threat. I am running for governor because I believe Arizona has so much potential, but we are headed in the wrong direction. Our economy is not recovering the way we want it to. The jobs that we're growing pay less than the jobs that we lost in the recession. Our education system has been decimated by budget cuts. Today, 1/3 of our teachers leave every year. We have the largest class sizes in the United States. We have badly hurt our K-12 education system through its cuts. And if there's anything else I hope that you will remember about me today and tonight, it is that I will veto any budget that cuts another nickel or another penny from public education. I am proud to be here with Jennifer and my son Will, who's headed off to the Army, and our son too is at home, 6-year-old Monty. These education cuts are the most important issue facing us to drive our economy. And right now, we have a lawsuit which has been settled by the Supreme Court, which is Cave Creek versus Ducey, which we've got to deal with right away. And I am calling for us to begin funding our schools immediately. No more delays, no more postponements. It is time for us to make funding K-12 education our principal priority, and I hope Doug will join me with that tonight. Thank you.
And thanks to both of you. Now let's get going with our conversation. Your success as governor and Arizona's success depends on the health of our state budget. As our next governor, one of you will inherit a budget crisis. Don't take my word for it. That's exactly what Governor Jan Brewer said not too long ago. Let's put a graphic up on the screen. Here's what one of you will face. The legislature's budget staff projects a $285 million deficit in the current fiscal year. That's right now. That includes $320 million in court-ordered back pay because the legislature and governor illegally underfunded K-12 education. That court-ordered payment, as you know, could grow into the billions. Looking ahead to fiscal 16, which would be your first formal budget as governor, the deficit is projected at $765 billion. Talking about almost $1 billion over the next 2 years right now. One piece of good news, there is a rainy day fund stocked with about $450 million. For use as the legislature and the governor choose. Let's start with that payment to education. A judge ordered the first payment to be made immediately. There are some appeals. Doug Ducey, will you ask the legislature in January to make that payment?
What I want to do, Bram, is I want to make sure that the resources in K-12 education get to our classrooms so that they can support our teachers teaching and our students learning. I think it's important that we understand where the state is financially and where it was, and I come at this as the state treasurer. In December of 2009, we were negative $730 million in our checking account. So there was not $1 available to pay teachers, fill potholes, or provide any essential state services. Over the last 4 years, the state has dug out of that financial hole. Today, we have $1.4 billion cash in our operating account, $454 million in a reserve account earning interest. If the courts rule that we must put this money into education, we'll put it into education. But what I want to do is take the opportunity to restructure our formulas that I don't believe are working. I don't believe are getting dollars to the classrooms to support our teachers. So I'll take this crisis as an opportunity to restructure our education funding, and I do support the appeal.
But we will talk about education funding a little bit later. Will you ask the legislature, as soon as you take office, to pay the first installment? Once the appeal is exhausted and the final court ruling has come, yes. Fred DuVal, same question. I'm also going to expand it, and Doug Ducey got to this as well. What would you do? Would you ask the legislature to make that first payment and explain with as many specifics as you can where you're going to find the money to deal with this deficit?
Bram, thanks for the question, and the answer is yes, without any hesitation. And in fact, quite the contrary, I wish that the governor would begin the discussions now. Our class sizes are too large. The destabilization is too great. We are hearing story after story about what's happening in our classroom. We've got to begin making this investment now, discussing how we move forward, and let me be specific how we do it. Number one, the Rainy Day Fund is here for that purpose. We should draw upon it as the first step. Number two is we need to look at state trust land. It is now coming back into full value and offers us some potential. We can do procurement reform in the state, centralizing procurement in order to pull together some dollars to get back into our classroom. But we must have the commitment to put education first and quit the delays, quit the appeals, and then grow ourselves out of this recession.
This is the number one question I'm getting for folks, this deficit, which will confront you. I'm not hearing anything that gets us to $300 million, let alone $1 billion. Doug Ducey, take a crack at it. You've talked about one of your lines in an ad is you built a business, now you want to shrink a government. Well, looks like this is your opportunity. What are you going to shrink?
Well, I think the opportunity, again, with our budget is to go through it as a businessman, line by line, dollar by dollar, and get rid of anything that's not working, like a lobbyist loophole or a regulation that weighs down our business community and the creation of jobs. There's just no way to fix this budget without kickstarting our economy. And that's why I'm excited about the opportunity to be governor. I'm someone who's built a brand that's known and loved around the country and now the world. I believe I understand what makes small businesses grow. And I want you to imagine an Arizona where existing companies are growing and where out-of-state companies look to Arizona as the perfect place in which to do business.
I'm going to have to, sorry, I hate to interrupt. I want to reel this back into the deficit discussion because this is big and I'm not sure the audience is hearing answers to the question. Again, you talk about shrinking a government. What services, where would you start with shrinking this government?
Well, what I would do is I want to start with the government that we need, rather than talking about cuts, to talk about...
What government, what's off the table, what's on the table as far as the government we need?
Well, let me tell you what I won't do, Bram. I'm not going to raise taxes, okay? That's a commitment that I'll make tonight. I'm going to take
so no new revenue, so where are the cuts going to come from?
I'm going to go through the budget like a business person, line by line and dollar by dollar to restructure this. Let's start with the assets that we have. There's $1.4 billion cash in the bank today. You said it, Bram, $454 million in a reserve account earning interest, and the Permanent Land Endowment Trust Fund is at an all-time record high of $4.5 billion. Our state has assets, and I'm going to look at the budget one fiscal year at a time and deal with it.
Can you give us, again, an idea? What is on the table? Well, where are the cuts going to cut?
I would say everything is on the table except education. I do believe that we need to, this is a long-term investment in our state. I think a growing economy is an economy that addresses its taxes, its regulation, and its liability. But we also have to have children coming out of our K-12 system that are equipped for the future.
Fred DuVal, I'm not going to let you off the hook either.
Yeah,
give us specifics. What would you cut? Where would you raise revenue? Because you have indicated you want to add programs. Where's that money going to come from?
You know, I'd love Doug to finish that answer, because what I'm talking about is going forward and making these payments now. The voters have spoken. The court has now ruled. Doug is proposing appealing it. And if he's serious, if he's going to be honest about saying education needs to be off the table, then let's get on with this commitment. It is court-ordered, and it is the single most important thing we have to do. And other
that
things...
That payment puts us in a deficit right away. Where's the money going to come from for that payment?
I've indicated some specifics. Number one, we will look to the rainy day fund. Number two, I will look to procurement reform, which has been done in many states very successfully. Number three, we will look to whether or not there are opportunities to privatize portions of state government.
Privatizing portions of state government,
quite
such
possibly.
as?
There's been discussion. Both of us have talked about possibly the lottery. There are other things which other states have played with that look like opportunities to monetize. We'll have to have a comprehensive look at all of those things. We will look to make sure that in the way we structure access, that we look to create more prevention and wellness in order to bring the health spend down, because it's such a big part of the budget. Those are some specifics.
Seems like a lot more work to get to $1 billion. A lot more. Let's move on to education. Rate the importance of the state's education system, K-12 and universities, as a tool for building our economy. Is it the most important tool in the box, or one of several tools? Doug Ducey.
Oh, it's one of several tools. I mean, like I said, I want to look at Arizona as an economy that's not only growing for our existing businesses, but where others outside look to our state as the perfect place in which to do business. I'm really getting tired about the rhetoric around jobs. What leaders do is they go get jobs, and we're perfectly positioned to do this as a state. California is right next door, and they are pushing producers and companies out of their state. They're not coming to Arizona. We're already Chicago's favorite suburb, and Illinois is pushing businesses out of their state, but they're going to Indiana, Florida, and Texas. So I want to begin now. I mean, it's time to act. We need to improve our tax code. We need to lower regulations.
I'm trying to keep the focus on K-12 and universities.
Well,
so where does that fit?
Both of these together,
fit in the
Bram,
picture?
When you're going to bring people to our state, you've got to have an attractive place in which to do business, and K-12 is part of that discussion.
Fred DuVal, the Arizona legislature has cut more than $400 million in funding for universities. You're being clobbered for 5 tuition increases while you were on the Board of Regents. You've told a reporter, I'm not philosophically against tuition increases. Under what conditions would you support more increases to support universities?
Let me address this ad. There's roughly $2 million so far that's been spent on this, and I welcome the chance to address it. Number one, I increased financial aid in Arizona faster and more aggressively than any state in the United States. And as a result, today there are more students of middle and lower income who are performing and smart and capable going to our universities than before. Number two, the governor and the legislature cut $400 million from our universities in 1 year. I took a leadership role, and we went after cuts. We sold off dorms. We privatized groundskeeping. We did a variety of things within that space to reduce costs. Beyond that, I was very proud to come up with an entire new delivery model for higher education called aztransfer.com. Today, students can go online and take courses from community colleges and universities and get their degree at 1/3 lower cost. The urgency of that moment required new thinking, and I led that. It is now a national best practice. Number four, as chairman of the Board of Regents, having redesigned our institutions, I produced a budget which resulted in the first zero flat tuition increase in modern Arizona history. Number five, our universities today are operating at a 2-3% tuition rate increase and stabilized with better students, better results, better retention, better research, and we've redesigned the institutions. And I don't appreciate these attacks, which are these half-truths, which don't explain the difficulty of a $400 million cut to our universities. People said, just close the campus, and I said, not going to happen. His team broke it, I fixed it.
Doug Ducey, your team broke it. $400 million in cuts in 3 years.
I don't think that's exactly accurate, Fred. I think the record would show that under your leadership on the Arizona Board of Regents, there was record high tuition increases, record high spending, and record high borrowing. You came into the Regents in 2006, and the budget was $860 million. For the next 5 years, you had at least $860 million to spend or more, and that was a record high. and the bonding continued, and the tuition hikes continued. If that's your governing philosophy, the state would be in terrible trouble in a downturn. So those are the facts.
We took a 1/3 enrollment increase during that time. Our per student investment remained flat for the time that I was on the Board of Regents, while we were taking on record levels of new enrollment. And the question simply became, folks said, just close campuses. The only way you can deal with this is to close campuses. There's no other legal way to get around this budget shortfall. I said, not going to happen. We're going to redesign the system. I was called in front of the entire National Governors Association to testify on aztransfer.com as to how it is that you create more access, more opportunities for more students at a lower price. Our Arizona universities produce degrees more efficiently than almost any university in the country. So don't talk to me about these inefficiencies. I fixed it. This was a crisis that was brought upon by 50% reduction in state investment in our students. And we can't have a 21st century economy unless we've got strong universities, and I fought to make sure they stayed open.
Doug Ducey, give us 2 ways you'd have gotten to $400 million in cuts to avoid tuition increases.
I think just like everyone in the audience here, just like every small business person, just like state government finally got to it, you have to tighten your belt. And I think we need to,
$400 million worth?
Well, you look at the budget of the universities over the course of time. I think we need to look at a way that we more effectively and efficiently educate our children and our higher learning, and we have to be accountable to the voters. I mean, there's just over $9 billion in the state budget. That's what we currently have. If we want to grow this economy, if we want to have a thriving K-12 system and a higher, and I came out here as a Midwestern kid to get an education. I mean, I'm a very proud Sun Devil. I talk about being an entrepreneurial fellow from the Eller School of Management at the U of A, but this is the situation. These are the amount of dollars we have to deal with, and we have to take a business-like approach as we reform education.
Would you have been okay with closing campuses?
No, I would not be okay with closing campuses.
It doesn't add up.
I'm not here to do Fred's job as a regent, but there are different options, and just like a legislature or a treasurer or what we did to reform the Permanent Land Endowment Trust Fund, I would look at different options so that we could do things more affordably than they were done.
Let's go to K-12 now. 90% of Arizona students attend K-12 public schools. What is the sharpest difference between the two of you, and how you would handle getting Arizona up from its near bottom of the country ranking on education, public education? Fred DuVal.
I think this will point to one of the biggest differences between us. Doug has, throughout the campaign, talked about reducing Arizona's income tax to zero. Let me put that in perspective. We have, as Doug just said, a $9 billion budget. The state income tax is about 40, maybe 45% of that. The notion that you could, on top of the budget deficit that Bram has just described, that you could withdraw 40% of the state budget and still fund healthcare, corrections, education is tooth fairy math. It's just not a real set of choices. You've got to make decisions. My number one priority will get us back into the business of investing in education, making the tough choices to assure that that will happen. And this notion that we can have it both ways, I mean, look, I'd like to cure cancer and promise everyone balmy summers, but you've got to be candid about the choices that we face. This deficit will not allow us to do both education and that kind of tax repeal.
The deficit might not allow us to put more money into education plus something else. So you say tough choices. What's the tough choice you're going to make to invest more in education?
We are going to grow. We're going to be able to have the opportunity to decide in the out years what we do with the growing Arizona economy.
Day one, you've got a $300 million deficit. I come back to my first question.
I've given you 5 examples. Welcome some from Doug. I've given you 5 starting places.
We'll look forward to see if voters think that gets the $300 million. Hey. Doug Ducey, tooth fairy math. We're jumping ahead to taxes. I was going to get to that, but I asked you this back in June. The math just doesn't work if you get the income tax down to zero. You have to make up $4 billion.
Well, the income tax to zero is a direction. And let me address this from this perspective. I come at our tax code it ought to look like somebody actually wrote it on purpose. I think that would be the beginning of a healthy economy that would protect Arizona families and hard-working taxpayers. I think people deserve a tax code that's simpler, fairer, flatter, and a whole lot easier to deal with. That is not what we have today. So I do want to reform our tax code. Steve Moore of the Wall Street Journal and Bob Robb of the Arizona Republic say these are doable ideas, but it's going to take some time. I've said I'm going to need a term or two as governor to do this. You'll need a growing economy and a more effective and efficient government, and you'll need a plan of action. So that's the direction I want to go.
It's a direction, but how much?
To deal with education today, we're going to have to take the $9 billion in total that we're spending, and I want to restructure that.
$9 billion in spending on what?
$9 billion in total.
We're spending
county, state, and federal on K-12 education.
And Arizona spends about what? $1.5 billion. The state itself spends.
The state spends a portion of that. The county spends a portion of that through property taxes, and then the federal government does.
Bram, can I talk about my direction?
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to stick with taxes because Bob Robb also said taxes really don't make much of a difference in decisions, and our tax rate is already really low. But again, where's the money coming from? This is a consistent theme this evening.
So I'm addressing that. First, let me say to those, with all due respect, that say that taxes don't make a difference, why is New York running these commercials that saying move your business to New York and you'll have 10 years of no taxes if taxes don't make a difference? Why is Texas led the nation in economic development, job creation, and business relocation with no income tax if taxes don't make a difference? So that's aspirational and that's directional, but when I come into office in 2015, I'm going to have to deal with 1 million school children in our K-12 system. And what's going to be of the most importance to me is that they have the proper funds and resources at the classroom level. And I believe we can spend this $9 billion better than we're spending it today. And that's what I want to do, is lead the reform around our funding formulas that I don't think are serving our children and our teachers and our parents well. $9 billion is a lot to start with, and those are the dollars I'm going to spend.
Okay, we're going to wrap up education in a minute. We have been asking for viewer questions on AZ with the hashtag AZGov. Let's get to a couple right now. Are you for Common Core? Why or why not? Fred DuVal.
The Arizona proposal of college and career-ready standards led by Governor Brewer is something I do support, along with Governor Chris Christie, along with bipartisan governors across the United States. If we're going to compete in a 21st century economy, we need to have accountability metrics that compare us to other schools across the city, across the state, across the world. The only way you can do that is to have some internationally benchmarked aspirational goals. These are not curriculum. These are simply goals based upon student grades and ages. If we're going to be serious about investing in education, which is the direction I want to go, I don't want to do more tax reform. I want to invest in education. That is my goal. We've got to tie that to the kind of performance expectations of our schools, our teachers, our students, in order to assure that we get better results from every school, so that every child, no matter what home, what school, where they start in life, no matter what zip code, that spark, that magic that happens in K-12 can ignite their potential to contribute as employees and ultimately as employers in our economy. And the way we do that is to make sure that our students can perform in an international economy.
Doug Ducey, do you support Common Core? Why or why not?
I do not support Common Core. I've spoken out against Common Core, and I want to tell you the reason why. George Will wrote in the Washington Post that 50 years of continuing federal involvement in K-12 education has resulted in mediocrity. Common Core has been tied to Washington, D.C. for funding. And for that reason, I believe it's co-opted something that began as a good idea and now I think is unworkable in the rooms that I had to talk to moms and dads all across this campaign. So I want you to know what I'm for. I'm for higher standards. I'm for teachers being empowered in the classroom. I'm for principals who really make the difference as leaders of those schools, and we've seen that all across the state. And I'm for reforming these funding formulas so that we're getting the dollars and the resources where they're needed, and they will make the difference. I'm also not part of this blame Arizona first crowd. We have 3 of the top 10 high schools in the nation in the state of Arizona. We know how to educate a child. The problem is there's too many places where it's not being done. I want to come and reapply the best practices at the schools that are working across our state and lead the country in improvement year over year.
The Gilbert School Board voted last night to ask the governor to let them out of Common Core. Would you let the Gilbert School Board out of Common Core if you could?
I would let the Gilbert School... Why would...
You would let the Gilbert School Board out of Common Core?
Why would I mandate to a school board as governor what they should do in terms of an initiative that has Peggy Noonan, George Will, the list goes on and on of the teachers union that are opposed to this. What I've said about Common Core is I don't know who botched the rollout, but I have found it an unhappy distraction. If we can talk about outcomes and results for our kids, if we can vision as to what a kid looks like when they walk across a stage on the day of graduation and what they know, and then lead that from a state perspective, that's the kind of education system a Doug Ducey administration will move forward in Arizona.
One of your clearest goals that you've outlined is you would fund the wait lists of popular charter schools. Does that mean paying for them to construct, paying these private operators to construct their schools, or somehow helping to finance that?
This is actually another idea from reading the Arizona Republic that I received, but we have, like I said, some of the finest high schools in the nation here. The Basis school system has a 2,000 kid wait list. The Great Heart school system has a 12,000 kid wait list. I just believe that mom and dad know better where their child should go to school than someone that writes the zip code lines. So I would like to sit down with education champions and the folks that work with the funding formulas and say, how can we move these kids into the school they prefer more quickly? That's what I'd like to do. I think it's a huge opportunity.
Does that mean funding construction, the taxpayers
No, it doesn't mean funding construction.
Well, what exactly does it mean then if there's no school for a long wait list?
And let me also say it's not just public charter schools. It's also public traditional K-12s that are excelling. With open enrollment in the state, we have parents that want to move their kids from one district to another. I want to reward and incent those districts. So I think there's ways that we can do that by giving flexibility to those dollars so moms and dads can decide where they should be spent to educate their child in the K through 12 system.
So I still don't understand what funding wait list means.
I'd offer an example of the educational savings accounts. I think that those have done a good job to demonstrate flexibility for a small number of our children. And if there is a school with a wait list, I think there would be an opportunity through the educational savings account type model, the empowerment savings account model, to let a child decide where they want to go to school in the public system and to fund the wait list.
All right. Fred DuVal, care to comment?
I'd love to respond. 85% of our children go to the traditional public school. Many of them don't have parents who can run them across town to a different school. They are in their neighborhood, they're in their school. And what we know about talent, what we know about human capacity is that it is randomly distributed at birth. Opportunity is not equally distributed in life. And so gifted students occur in every house, in every home, in every neighborhood, and in every school. And what we've got to make sure we do is fund schools across the board in a way that those gifts can be lifted, that magic can occur. I was talking earlier today with Amber Gould, who is here tonight. She's from the Glendale School District. She was walking me through what's taking place in her school district. Let me give you some examples. They have eliminated librarians and counselors. In Scottsdale today, every Wednesday, they let the students out at 1:15 as a budget savings. The students lose 2+ hours every single day. Tucson Unified School District told me the other day 150 classrooms don't have a permanent teacher. A Phoenix superintendent recently told me that he's put together a 7th grade math curriculum. He can't find a permanent teacher. He has 7 different math teachers, substitutes, lined up 2 weeks in a row. Doug talks about all the money that's washing around in education. We are strangling our capacity to make sure that every school provides every student the potential to be everything they can be. And Bram, you asked the question earlier, how do I place education in the array of assets for economic development? I think it is the most important thing. It's a talent-driven world where human capacity, human productivity will be the most important thing. We can't compete on size against China and India. We can't compete on cost against Vietnam or Thailand. America and Arizona has to compete on the smartest, most innovative workforce. And that happens in every, as I said, in every home and every school district. So we've got to make sure that we've resourced these students and these schools better. And you can't get there if your first priority is tax repeal. You've got to make education your priority.
Going to move on to jobs now. Arizona has typically led the country out of recession, but that's not happening after the Great Recession. Let's look at the numbers. The state has regained 63% of the jobs it's lost since hitting bottom. The country as a whole has regained 107% of those lost jobs. In other words, all the jobs and then some. The good news, we rank 14th in job growth for the first 7 months of the year, but very unusual, we trail the Southwest, Nevada, Texas, Utah, Colorado, and even our favorite state, California. There is more. People are not moving to Arizona the way they once did. New home permits are flat. Millennials are not buying homes the way baby boomers did. Economists are pushing our recovery back to 2016. Are we at a turning point here, gentlemen, a moment where the growth economy we have lived on for decades is over? Fred DuVal.
It's certainly not over. Arizona has a exceptional, I would call it a DNA. We are a innovative, entrepreneurial place, and it is exactly the right asset in a 21st century economy where speed, adaptation, economic growth, risk, small businesses is the most important thing. We've got that in Arizona. But here's what I hear from businesses looking to move across the country. They say, will I find the workforce that I need in order to grow my business? Will the talent be there? And secondly, will my children have a good school to go to? We're losing in that debate. This is not about taxes. We've lowered taxes in Arizona 23 of the last 24 years in a race to be more competitive. And you've just heard the statistics. We aren't growing the way we need to. Education is the driver of the 21st century economic growth, and we've got to simply make it our principal priority. That's why I will veto any budget that comes to me with another nickel in cuts.
Doug Ducey, why is Arizona falling behind?
This is why I'm running for governor, is to kickstart our economy and to grow again like we've enjoyed in the past. I'm just curious, how many people in the audience here tonight were born somewhere other than the state of Arizona? Well, it looks to me at least well over 50 or 60% of the hands went up. I ask this question everywhere across the state. The only place I've been burned is at the Cotton Growers Council. Those folks were all born here. We've got a great state. In the world of ice cream, people vote with their dollars. In the game of states, people vote with their feet, with their Ryder trucks and their U-Hauls, and we've been leading in population growth for decades. What we haven't been leading in is economic development, job creation, and business relocation. I've talked to governors like Rick Perry, Jeb Bush, Mitch Daniels, and Mike Pence in Indiana, and Scott Walker. We need to profile our state for what we know it to be, the warm, welcoming, inviting state that is wide open and entrepreneurial. And the governor will be signed in January 2015, and think of what January is going to look like in the state of Arizona. We're going to kick off with the Fiesta Bowl. 2 weeks later, we're going to move to the Pro Bowl, and the entire country is going to be watching. We're going to have the largest golf tournament in the world here, and we'll be advertising back in Chicago, where it will probably be a freezing, miserable winter. And then at the end of that week, the entire world will be focused on Arizona as the Super Bowl kicks off. It's a great time to hit the refresh button and to brand the state that we are and let people know that we're open for business. There's no way to really create these jobs without bringing businesses from California and Illinois and the other places that they're moving and allowing our current small business owners to grow and thrive. I was a small businessman. I know what makes a small business work. Those are the principles, and that's the energy I'm going to bring to the governor's office.
We have, with all due respect, we have those events every year or most years. People have been coming here from Illinois. Well, not the Super Bowl,
but
we have
Super Bowl's different.
The golf tournament. People see Arizona in winter. They've seen that for years. We've been going after Chicago and California for years. My question was, What's different? It seems something fundamental has changed, so what are you going to do that's different, that's just not part of the playbook we've had for many years?
Well, the challenge I would say back to you, Bram, is I think in many ways we've grown just organically. We've had, in many ways, an embarrassment of riches, of people that just say, oh, I want to go move there for no other reason except that it seems to happen. I want to lead the effort. I want to make growth the objective. I think that growth is a gift. You know, I fly home every summer to see my dad around Father's Day back to Toledo, Ohio. When you fly back to Toledo from Sky Harbor, you land in Detroit, Michigan. In 1960, Detroit was the richest city in the country. And I imagine they never thought the growth would stop or the big three could be slowed down. And it's completely different, and it's due to a lack of leadership and poor public policy. I think sometimes I hear people that actually make a bit of fun of Arizona because we grow, because we build a lot of houses, and we have a construction and real estate industry.
So do you have any explanation for why we're not growing now? Why are we lagging?
Well, I think if you look typically when the country goes into a downturn, it's harder on Arizona because our economy has been built on growth. And when the country comes out of a downturn, can I answer your question?
We have to go to the break.
Okay.
We talked about this earlier.
Okay, the hard stop. You got it,
Yes,
Bram.
we have a hard stop coming up here in just about 20 seconds. Good evening, Doug Ducey. My apologies, I interrupted you in mid-thought there. Please continue if you like.
Just that we're fortunate that we have a state that people want to move to. And when the economy turns down nationally, it affects us. It hurts us more as a growth economy. And when the economy booms, typically we have boomed right along with it or even more so. So I do have a concern, but our national economy, Bram, is not booming. This is a very tepid recovery. I mean, this is part of the reason I believe the Arizona Chamber of Commerce has endorsed me and the National Federation of Independent Businesses. They know as a business person, I understand how to make things grow, and that's what I'll bring to our state's economy.
Okay. Let's move on to some of the social issues which were in the forefront back in the spring. Arizona's image, as you've noted, is an economic development tool, but Arizona took a beating last spring when SB 1062 passed the legislature. Major corporations warned they were going to shun Arizona because of what they saw as a bill promoting intolerance toward LGBT residents and visitors. Doug Ducey, Kathy Herod of the Center for Arizona Policy wrote SB 1062. She is one of your earliest endorsers. If the legislature passes another version of 1062, would you veto it?
Well, when 1062 came up, I said that I would veto it. And Bram, you're pointing out an individual in my coalition, and I was very proud of my coalition. I built the broadest coalition of anyone in the Republican primary, and I'm going to continue to add to that coalition. Again, I'll go to January when the governor is signed in. We all know what a wonderful state this is to live in. So I think that idea of taking that opportunity to project that out is something that I will do, but I've stated my position.
So if that bill came to you again, you would veto it?
I've stated what I would do. I said I would veto it, and I'm consistent.
Fred DuVal?
Yes, I would veto it. When it first was coming out of the legislature, I called upon the governor immediately. Don't even wait. Go to the legislature. Veto this before this firestorm of national criticism that has hurt our economy so much. It took Doug a couple days to get to that point. We can't let these issues of intolerance and discrimination define our state. I go back to the theme I mentioned earlier. If you really appreciate that it is about drawing talent, talent comes in every God-given form, and it comes every sexual orientation, it comes every color. You've got to put out a welcome mat, not a stop sign. And these issues like 1070 and 1062 create a image for Arizona that is not who we are, and it's not who we aspire to be, and it is not consistent with a talent-based economy. And so, yes, I would absolutely veto it. And I would tell the legislature, don't even send it. Another
related image question. Doug Ducey, you're a salesman. You get the value of branding. Why would you attach your brand to the Joe Arpaio brand? You said you want to represent all Arizonans, and yet to Latinos, Arpaio is a pariah. Why would you attach your brand to his brand?
Well, Bram, let me say I did build that coalition. It was the broadest coalition of anyone that was in the race, and I'm proud of my coalition. Regardless of
Joe Arpaio made your final argument to voters.
Regardless of how people want to get me to run away from my coalition, I continue to add to that coalition. And I've got people like Leah Marquez Peterson, during her day job, not in her official role, but in her day job. She runs the Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. The Latino rooms that I've been in, the number one issue is the economy. The second issue is education. And I leave those rooms thinking that we've got a winning message to win voters to that side. I'm not asking folks to switch parties. I'm asking people to get behind a pro-growth, positive message for the state of Arizona, and I intend to win a large share of the Latino vote.
But do you understand how Joe Arpaio being on your team sends a specific message to Latinos in the state? He is opposed by a majority of them, according to the polls.
Well, according to the polls, and I'll tell you, I had someone tell me that if you do get to become governor, Doug, you'll get to set the agenda. But when you run for governor, it's the electorate that sets the agenda. And we had an issue where there were thousands of people transported from Texas to Arizona and dropped off at Greyhound bus stations. And border security, again, became a huge issue inside our state. And I did my best to responsibly address this, and I worked with my coalition to do that. And I'm here now talking about the economy and education. But this is a very real issue in Arizona. But I think in some ways it's exclusive of the opportunity to grow our economy, to partner with our largest trading partner to the south, which is Mexico, and to make the case in these Latino rooms of opportunity for all. Good jobs, a chance to get ahead, and kids getting a year of growth for a year of seat time in our K-12 system.
Fred DuVal.
Yeah, Bram, I'd like to respond. I do think you get defined by your endorsements and your coalitions, and Doug has been endorsed by Sarah Palin and Ted Cruz and Joe Arpaio and Kathy Harridan. I think it says a lot about the choices that he makes and the policies that he's pursuing. I respect that. Those are his choices. I have a very different coalition. Many of you may have seen a full-page ad in the Arizona Republic with over 200 Republican endorsements. Well, over 20 former legislators and city officials, many of them from the East Valley. What I believe, and it comes out of my 40-some years of working across the aisle, is that what Arizona needs is a bipartisan centrist coalition that is about economic growth, fixing the classroom, long-term investment in talent. Whether it was working with Governor Babbitt and the Republican legislature to build access at the groundwater code or the Phoenix Freeway system, all of which took bipartisan leadership, whether it was working in the Clinton White House to implement welfare reform throughout my life, or most recently working with T. Boone Pickens on American energy independence. I believe that the things that really change the country and the state occur when folks show the capacity to build coalitions across the aisle. That's where sustainable strategic activity that is successful for Arizona occurs.
Bram, since
15 seconds, please.
Since Fred wanted to point out my coalition, I'd point out that part of his coalition is Raul Grijalva, someone who said boycott Arizona. He's also financially supported Nancy Pelosi, and he spent his entire life as a special interest lobbyist. That's what you've done. So to say now that you're not a partisan, someone who is the Democrat money man for the Democratic Governors Association, is a bipartisan individual. I've been selling waffle cones. That's what I've been doing. I've been in the private sector. Fred, your entire life has been at the intersection of politics, money, and Washington, D.C.
If I was some big partisan, I don't think 200 Republicans, including many elected officials, including Leo Corbett. Let me tell you a story. Leo Corbett was the Senate president during the time that I was Governor Babbitt's chief legislative liaison and ran against Babbitt in 1982. He's one of the endorsers. These are people that have seen my strategic ability to reach across the aisle and build sustainable coalition around big outcomes.
Let's get to the questions we've been getting at AZGov on our Twitter feed. What is your stand on gay marriage? It is before the Federal Appeals Court right now. Fred DuVal, do you support it or
yes,
not?
I favor marriage equality. I believe that it is time to recognize I have family members who have struggled with this issue, and throughout my life we've dealt with this, and it is high time that we end this discrimination and enable folks who are in love and have stable relationships to marry.
Doug Ducey, do you support same-sex marriage?
I'm supportive of traditional marriage, and I've said to folks that as an elected leader, I don't expect people to agree with me on every issue, but I will state what I believe. I'll respect others, and I'll listen, and I'll treat everyone with dignity and kindness. And on an issue like this, a governor doesn't make the decision. This decision is decided by the people, I believe, and we'll see what the people say, but that's where I stand.
And if the courts ruled in favor of same-sex marriage, you would abide by that?
Well, when you become governor, you take an oath to uphold the law and the Constitution, and I will uphold our law and Constitution.
All right. Another question on the minimum wage. Would you increase the minimum wage in Arizona to $15 an hour? Doug Ducey.
Well, listen, nobody wants a minimum wage job. I think what people want are fulfilling careers. And my concern is I want to maximize everyone's opportunity to have a larger paycheck. My son has a minimum wage job. He makes $7.90 an hour. I don't know that he'd still be employed if the minimum wage went to $15. So I would first want to say, is there any talk of a teenage minimum wage so that we don't destroy teenagers that are in the workforce? And then the second thing is the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office said if that legislation were to pass, America would lose 500,000 jobs. As somebody who wants to see more jobs, more opportunity, more careers happen, I have to think for us to do something and 500 jobs to be lost is not a good idea, so I'm not supportive of it.
Fred DuVal.
There is no question that it is virtually impossible to support a family on today's minimum wage. It has been crushing. The minimum wage has not kept up. Fortunately, in Arizona, the voters, in their wisdom some years ago, passed an initiative so that the Arizona minimum wage is indexed to inflation, and it keeps it more current, which is, I think, the right approach going forward.
You know, Fred, DuVal, something just occurred to me. Did I give, and correct me, did you get a chance to respond to your jobs plan? Earlier in the evening, did you respond? We were talking a lot with Doug Ducey about his jobs plan. I'm not sure I brought you in that conversation.
I'd welcome a chance.
Well, did I bring you in? I don't think
I don't recall, Rim.
Okay.
I'll leave it to you.
Trying to be fair here,
Yes,
folks.
indeed. I appreciate that. But I'd be happy to talk about jobs.
You know, and same thing, as specific as you can. You heard me say to Doug Ducey, we've been doing a lot of the same things for a while. What can you do that is different?
Terrific, sure. Welcome the question. It is so important that we create economic energy in Arizona. Number one is quit these self-destructive things like 1062, clearly. But let's get on with growing the economy. What are the component parts? Number one is nursing small businesses from the kitchen table to the first lease. We lose too many small businesses in those first couple of years. I think we need lower tax treatment and real public policy tools to make sure that entrepreneurial energy is more successful. Number two, trade with Mexico is an enormous opportunity for us. Mexico's middle class is growing faster than our own. We are perfectly positioned, but we've been watching Texas, New Mexico, and California steal a lot of that trade. We have got to create the kind of infrastructure and strategy and engagement with Mexico to take advantage of that. And I will lead a delegation of bipartisan business leaders to Mexico City in the first week that I'm governor. Number three, back to what we were talking about earlier, you've got to have an innovation-based economy where you're discovering and innovating the new things that the rest of the world will want to buy. That requires research and development. It requires research and development tax help. It requires strong universities. It requires commercialization. It requires export strategies. But we've got to be in the business where we are creating things that other people outside Arizona want to buy if we want to grow our economy.
Let's move to immigration. It seems like we only talk about Mexico in the context of immigration. President Obama said last weekend he will take executive action on immigration after the midterm elections. Could include some kind of legal status for millions of undocumented immigrants. Fred DuVal, do you support the president acting on his own?
What I support and what I hope the president will do is take this moment to create a permanent, sustainable, bipartisan solution. There is a bipartisan consensus which has not yet passed the Congress, but it is time for a comprehensive act led by our Senators McCain and Flake, as well as Democrats, that focuses more resources on the border to secure the border more than it is.
So is that a no?
What I want to do is get a permanent solution with the Congress.
But do you support the president acting on his own?
He is not going to act, and I support his postponement of that consideration.
He's going to act after the midterms, he says.
I hope not. I hope what happens is that we solve this once and permanently so that we have a solution that works for Arizona and works for our border.
So is that a yes or a no?
I don't think it's not going to happen. You said it's not going to happen. So it's a hypothetical question.
He said it's going to happen after the midterms.
I don't think it will. I think we're going to pass a bill.
Okay, Doug Ducey.
The president said it's going to happen. It's going to happen, and I'm opposed to it. An executive order from Washington, D.C. is not bipartisan.
Well, I'm in favor of comprehensive reform passed by our Congress. It's being held up by the Republicans in the House. It is time for the President and the Republicans who have failed us in Washington. This dysfunction has gone on long enough. I've watched it with energy, working with T. Boone Pickens. I've watched it on budget issues, and now we're watching it on immigration. We need this Congress to act on a permanent solution that works for our border communities and our state economy.
Doug Ducey, I mentioned a second ago, we only talk about Mexico in the context of immigration. What about trade with Mexico? I don't believe Arizona has a trade office there. I think Phoenix and Tucson are opening one. What's the plan for developing trade with Mexico? Name 2 or 3 specific opportunities.
We're going to have a trade office with Mexico. They're our largest trading partner ×4. This is a great opportunity for the state of Arizona. We're perfectly geographically positioned next to probably the worst run state in the nation, California, which is pushing people, producers, and businesses out, and an ascendant Mexican economy. So it's a relationship with the governor of Sonora, it's a relationship with the governor of Sinaloa, and it's a relationship with the president of Mexico with a trade office. It's not only symbolic, it's substance. We've got the Mariposa Port in Nogales, which is a world-class port. It's also an opportunity for us to quit sweeping our HERF fund and build infrastructure. So when the good guys are coming across, the trucks, the transit, the tourism, the trade, they feel welcome to America and welcome to Arizona. This is our natural relationship, and I think it's really the way to jumpstart southern Arizona's economy. Pima County, Cochise, Santa Cruz are in a much different position than what we're feeling in Maricopa, and I believe pulling the tourniquet off of that port and letting trade flow, taking a page again out of Texas, will dramatically affect our economy in a positive direction.
Care to add anything?
Yes, we have to embrace Mexico in a big way, and I touched on it earlier. There's more to be done than Mariposa Port, although that is clearly, at the moment, a real bottleneck. This deepwater port in the Baja is a huge opportunity for us to move goods north and then move it east and west. It means the switching yard at Picacho Station. It means more cargo capacity at our airports. We need to look at this as an architectural design, as how it is that we are the most cost-effective, efficient place for Mexican goods to come, and to rebuild the Mexican tourist traffic, the disappearance of which has decimated so many towns in Tucson and southern Arizona.
A question I like to ask at debates, is there anything the other side is saying about you that you think is flat out wrong? Doug Ducey.
Well,
one thing. Just one.
I'll just say that Cold Stone Creamery is an American success story that started right here in Arizona. We built it to 1,440 ice cream stores operating in all 50 states. We sold Cold Stone in 2007. Today it operates in 25 countries around the world, and it's something I'm most proud of my wife Angela and my 3 sons. And after that, I'm most proud of Cold Stone Creamery.
So what's the one thing people have said that's wrong?
Well, anybody that's watching TV sees what folks are saying about Cold Stone Creamery.
Fred DuVal, same question for you.
I too am proud of my family, certainly, and I do find it somewhat disingenuous that there is this barrage of partisan attack ads about this issue in the Board of Regents when we were faced with this $400 million cut. And it was out of context. It's a completely sort of a half-baked ad. It's the nature of politics. I get it. I issued a dark money challenge with Doug some months ago. Let's call out these folks and tell them, go away. Let's not have this kind of a debate. Let's have this kind of debate where we mix it up and we share our views and visions of Arizona through our own voices. But unfortunately, that's not what's happened. Cities have big beefs with the legislature. They've lost a lot of funding over the last several years. What would you do to work with cities and towns to restore their revenue? Doug Ducey.
I would build a relationship. I saw Mayor Lewis here and Mayor Tibbs Shraney. I've gotten to know Mayor Smith rather well over the course of the campaign, and I'd reach out to these mayors who are doing an excellent job. You know, as somebody who believes in a more limited government, the last thing I want to do is dictate to our cities what they should do from the state capitol, just like I don't want our federal government dictating to our states from Washington. So when we have well-run city governments and city councils that want to get these things done, I want to get them their funding and their programs. Let them do what they need to do, and the state can do its role.
Fred DuVal?
I too would work with the mayors. Worked with mayors in many of the issues through my time building the Phoenix freeways and other issues through my background. The most important issue, I think, between the cities, counties, and state at the moment are these HERF fund sweeps. We are just devastating our infrastructure. We are so far behind, and it's got to be a priority that we stop the sweeps. Now, we do have a budget deficit. If we were to repeal the income tax, the deficit would be even greater, and you couldn't do that. But we've got to make sure that cities and towns have got the resources to assure that there's public safety, there's streets, there's road repair, and there's the highway growth of the future to support our business growth that we so badly need.
That brings us to the end of our questions. Now each candidate has 1 minute for a closing statement. We did flip a coin, as I said at the outset, and Mr. Ducey, you go first.
I want to thank Bram and Channel 12 and SRP and the Arizona Republic and everyone for putting on this forum tonight. It was a good day in the Ducey campaign when we learned that the National Federation of Independent Businesses and the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry had endorsed our campaign. Kick-starting the economy is what animates my reason to run for governor. I've spent my entire adult life in the private sector, in business, building a brand now that's known around the country and now the world. I've been your state treasurer for the last nearly 4 years, managing $12.5 billion of state assets that by any measure are in better condition and growing faster today than they were when I came into office. I want to take those skills, that business-like approach, and fresh entrepreneurial energy to the governor's office. But the reason that I want you to vote for me is the plan of action that I have for our state to kickstart our economy so that jobs are plentiful, to reform K-12 education so that there are no winners or losers inside these classrooms, and to be the most innovative and inventive governor when they present new ideas to the federal government so we can take charge of the direction of our state. If you have questions about my campaign, you can go to DougDucey.com, @DougDucey on Twitter, or Doug Ducey on Facebook. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Fred DuVal.
Thank you all very much for your attention this evening. I so look forward to serving as your governor and leading Arizona to a strong new future that lies just in front of us. Here are the design imperatives that I think are important. One is, how do you create the most energized business growth in the country? Two, how do you create the best improvement in the K-12 space in the country? And three, how do you create an inclusive environment where everyone feels welcome and has a seat at the table? The most important of those is that we've got to get back into K-12 funding to assure that our students have a success. And it's an area where we disagree, and it is the signature issue of my campaign. But I'd like to finish with a story. I came to Tucson in 1963, and my father was asked to start a medical school at the University of Arizona. And one day, I should add, the legislature only gave the University of Arizona $1 million to start the medical school. We had to raise the money privately. We drove into a gas station, and the guy filling our tank, and it was a long time ago, knocks on the window and says, "Are you the doctor that's trying to raise money for the medical school?" And he said, "Yes." He goes into the mechanics bay, and 6 guys come out with a greasy Folgers can filled with their tips. And he says, "Doctor, if we want to make a better Tucson, all of us have to do our share. I'm hoping all of you will do your share to build the kind of education opportunities that we need for our children to grow our economy."
Thank you very much. Sorry I had to do that.
Thank you, Dad.
And that wraps up our debate for tonight. Thank you to all our sponsors. Thank you to the audience here, on TV, online, and most importantly, thank you to our candidates.